Hello there, I am Lex Landreneau, and today I'm going to be guiding you through one of the most monumentous years in recent memory, 2020. So sit back, relax, and get ready for some memories. In January, the long-awaited official exit of England from the European Union occurred, a truly monumentous day in world politics.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So there it is. The UK has left the European Union. 47 years of history brought to an end in the name of sovereignty and independence.
And I remember that something that was interesting was that they had the referendum, and then so it's a little different than in America. It was like they had the referendum on what to do, and instead of doing it, they kind of deliberated for years, just waiting around. So like, they decided let's do it, and then Theresa May, obviously her tenure ended before it was voted on in her tenure, but it ended. She stepped down before Brexit was actually enacted. So I think that's pretty interesting.
The official exit of England from the EU has been brewing for a long time, dictating national politics and the lives of many Englishmen. So, in order to get a better perspective on this issue, we have a certified Englishman on our show today.
It's been 4 years since that vote, and we only just recently left. So I think now is going to be the time where we start to see the really big effects from that. The first one that I can already point out is that, like, the day after and since still going on, we have trucks for exports that are stuck in the Channel Tunnel between here and France, that because of a simple leaving of Brexit and paperwork changing, that they can't go anywhere because they don't have the paperwork correct. I think, not being an expert, that people have gradually, as the effects, like stuff like the economy falling down and that kind of issue, I think that gradually we have come to regret the decision of voting to leave. But that's just in my experience, and I was a Remainer.
Look at that. A major international issue already solved in the first weeks of 2020. You hear that? Sounds like conflicts brewing in the Middle East.
That brings us to the biggest event of the week. On Thursday night U.S. time and early Friday morning in Iraq, General Qasem Soleimani, a high-profile Iranian general, is killed by a U.S. airstrike at Baghdad International Airport. Soleimani led the Quds Force under Iran's Revolutionary Guard, which is widely believed to support terrorist groups such as Hezbollah. The Pentagon says Soleimani organized attacks on U.S. coalition bases in Iraq over the last several months, including the December 27th rocket attack.
This is the equivalent of the Iranians assassinating the U.S. Secretary of Defense.
Iran is promising revenge.
خطای استراتژیک کردن. ما خواهند دید که روزهای سخت‌تری پیش روی اونها خواهد.
With memories of the wars in the Middle East in the early 2000s fresh in the minds of American citizens, this was truly a worrying event.
That the U.S. was trying to prevent terrorism, but in assassinating a high-ranking general, I guess my personal belief is not to get involved in foreign wars. I think a conflict with Iran is imminent. I think doing this stirred the pot even more. They hated us before. They're really, their hatred is extremely intense now.
Although the whole world was holding their breath for a good few days, it seems that a war between the US and Iran was narrowly avoided. However, the lives of people all over the world would be threatened in a new and dangerous way in March.
Coronaviruses are a large family of viruses that get their name from the halo of spike proteins on their outer surface, which resemble a crown, the corona under a microscope.
January saw the first death from coronavirus in its hometown in Wuhan, China. In a mere few months, there would be tens of thousands of cases around the globe in almost every nation. lockdowns and curfews would be enforced around the globe in order to protect the public. In many places, non-essential workers would be let out of a job, leading to economic downturn and mass unemployment. By the end of 2020, there would be nearly 2.5 million deaths from the virus, a truly staggering loss.
Like, if I was in a position of power, I'd want to try to minimize this, and so making people stay home, I think is absolutely a smart move. I think in that regard, we did take good steps to try to minimize COVID. If I was ever fearful of coronavirus, I just knew that I didn't want to get it because I knew my parents were in the high risk category. So when they said we had to stay home, I stayed home because as much as I wasn't fearful for myself, I was fearful of possibly getting it and then giving it to someone else that I was fearful for.
Although a vaccine was released in late 2020, COVID still exists across the nation today. In the early summer, as the nation struggled to deal with the staggering effects of COVID-19, a tragic incident in Minneapolis would forever change the course of the year.
There was always little crop ups every now and then, but the main event happened when George Floyd died. And I completely agree with the outrage, considering that it was, once you look at the video, it wasn't the best way to handle that whatsoever.
In Minneapolis, Minnesota, 46-year-old George Floyd was victim to these conditions. He'd lost his restaurant job and tested positive for COVID-19. Suspecting Floyd of using a forged $20 bill, police officer Derek Chauvin held his knee on his neck for several minutes.
People of all backgrounds, genders, and races have come together to demand change. Honor them, honor George, and make the necessary changes that make law enforcement the solution.
It was a huge thing in the US, and the US is it's kind of like a world leader. I'd say that anything that was US politics is considered world politics, and that movement was felt all around the globe, especially here in England. It was a huge thing here in the UK, not just in the US. We had people out in the streets and in squares taking down statues. Sometimes misguidedly just taking down statues because they see that taking down statues is the thing, but definitely a lot of support behind it, and I'm glad that they're getting some kind of recognition in that way for their efforts in 2020.
Protests and demonstrations for racial equality were seen all across the globe in the summer of 2020. However, 2020 proved to be a monumentous year in American politics as well.
Corrupt Ukrainians.
Ukrainian authorities. Ukraine.
Donald Trump is being impeached, and for some reason, it's all about this place, Ukraine. And it all begins with a phone call. On July the 25th last year, Ukraine's new president, Volodymyr Zelensky, spoke to Donald Trump. Mr. Zelensky wanted to discuss American military assistance, but Mr. Trump said he wanted a favor. President Trump was withholding hundreds of millions of dollars of military aid. His opponents smelled a rat. They said the president was abusing his power, using his office for personal political gain.
I solemnly and sadly open the debate on the impeachment of the President of the United States.
So Trump was being tried for Ukrainian interference with military aid that was approved by Congress and also resisting congressional subpoenas. I feel like it was a very partisan movement. There didn't seem to be a lot of bipartisan agreement on the amount of evidence, and even representatives from the Republican side who have known to have been huge supporters of bipartisan movements didn't really seem to buy on to what was being presented in the impeachment articles.
The world's greatest deliberative body,
not guilty, not guilty, not guilty,
took just over half an hour to clear President Trump of both charges.
Although only a handful of presidential impeachment trials have occurred in the United States, this event in January would be far overshadowed by a much more turbulent and exciting political event in November, the 2020 election.
what they decide will resonate around the world.
This is a fraud on the American public.
The elections, always extraordinary stories.
We could know the results as early as tomorrow morning, but it may take a little longer.
We just have no idea how this one will end.
This is an embarrassment to our country. Frankly, we did win this election.
That is factually inaccurate.
There's still so much that is uncertain.
So settle in. This is obviously a U.S. election like no other, in the middle of a pandemic. And for safety reasons, more Americans will vote by mail than ever before.
On election night, a winner could not be decided. However, as the days went on, more and more mail-in ballots were counted, giving Joe Biden a clear victory in the 2020 presidential election.
Basically, I remember the day of the election, me and my buddies, some kid named Carter Mayu, some kid named Lex Landreneau, me and my buddies, we got together and live streamed the event. I remember it being a little close the day of, and then we woke up the next day and it was like totally different, like it had totally changed suddenly.
Did the 2020 election have any impact on your life?
No impact on my life. It was, actually, that's not true. The 2020 election was a massive source of entertainment for me. It was quite entertaining.
Although Donald Trump would contest this election through lawsuits and other means, President Biden would end up being sworn in on January 6th of 2021. 2020, from assassinations to elections to the plague. Quite an eventful year. I hope that the memories you had were fond, or maybe they weren't. But either way, thanks for watching.